Is your workplace pension safe? Welcome to the Luco Show, where we have authentic conversations and hope to supply you with good information. Today I'm going to be giving you a quick snapshot of what I have seen that my workplace pension is comprised of. It should give you some sort of idea, because this is like the default workplace pension that I have, and I haven't made any adjustments to it. This is likely very similar in terms of its composition and the percentage allocations to whatever yours is if you have a workplace pension. So not financial advice, educational purposes only, but hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea as to what it is that your workplace pension is made up of in terms of shares, exposure to the property markets, and then there's some sort of combination of bonds and commodities. But effectively, the reason and the rationale behind me wanting to produce this video was that I have recently realised just how highly leveraged in the direction of the financial markets my workplace pension is, and kind of naively I hadn't really considered it before and assumed that it was quite safe and would be quite safe, but not necessarily, gaining a high return over time, but would always be a bit of a safe haven that, like, whenever you get to retirement, this money will be there for you. So I was actually discussing this recently, and this is one of the main reasons why I thought that this video would be of benefit to you. I was discussing this recently with two of my friends who are chartered accountants, and they're knowledgeable guys, they're good at their job, and I was saying, look, do you have any idea, or tell me what you know about your workplace pensions? And it surprised me that both of these guys didn't really know about the composition of their workplace pensions. All they really thought about it was, like, the height of their knowledge on it was, I really should be paying more into my workplace pension each month so that whenever I retire, I'll have more money to tide me over, type thing. And then I started discussing it with other people just in different all sorts of different backgrounds and jobs, and that theme was kind of consistent with people. So what I had noticed, which got me thinking about it, was like the only thing that I knew in relation to mine was every year I would get a letter through the door telling me that this is the snapshot, the current mark-to-market value of your pension portfolio as of financial year end, type thing. And what I noticed was basically last year, 2019, whenever I got the letter in the door in April, say 2019 roughly, it was actually about 10% higher than it was this year whenever I got the letter in the door 2020 April. Now obviously at the start of lockdown there was a sort of temporary crash around all financial markets in and around the region of 30%. So this obviously had quite a significant bearing and effect and impact on my pension portfolio, and that made me think, right, obviously there is quite a lot of exposure in my pension plan to the financial markets. So I wanted to do more of a deep dive into what actually is it that it's all made up of. And I have to say, I have been rather alarmed as to, in terms of finding out exactly what it is that it's been made up of. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with mine. This is in no way a suggestion as to what you should do with yours, but it's certainly, again, some food for thought in terms of, letting you know exactly what it's made up of if you have a default untouched kind of pension provided by a private pension fund portfolio. If you haven't touched it, it's likely very similar in terms of its makeup to mine. So 70% of my pension portfolio is made up of stocks, shares and equities, meaning that if the financial markets go through the roof, it'll go up, meaning that if there's a crash in the financial markets, 70% of your pension portfolio, your workplace pension, your private workplace pension, it's different to your government-backed pension scheme. So this is specifically just for those people who are paying in with their employers to private workplace pensions. But yeah, 70% of it is built into stocks, shares, equities. There's slight nuances between them, but they're effectively interchangeable names, just in case that confuses you at all. Then I was surprised to see that there was some form of property tracker to the value of 15% of the overall portfolio. Now, this is actually made up of loads and loads of different funds with very, very small percentages allocated to each one. But the largest, in terms of property, the largest fund area was industrial property, then came offices, and then came retail. So, look, in keeping with my other videos, again, not to be intentionally too pessimistic, let's say, but just in a scenario like we're in right now, right? Realities are that unemployment's really high and increasing. Businesses are closing down. The economy in many ways is probably worse than it's been in quite some time for obvious reasons. And yet the stock market, as a result of things like money printing and quantitative easing, has gone through the roof and is approaching, in most markets around the world, all-time highs for different reasons alluded to in other videos that you can watch on my channel, and I'm sure you're aware of when you apply. Common sense, uncommon sense, as Charlie Munger would say, should suggest to you that at some stage there will be more of an equilibrium between the realities of the economy and where the stock markets are. So if we're in this scenario now where stock markets are really high in a kind of artificial, temporary way, our pension portfolios, because they're so heavily exposed to stock markets, are also quite healthy and quite high. However, if and when, again, not financial advice, but educational purposes only, but in my opinion, if and when over these next few months we take a heavy move downwards in the financial markets, this will therefore have a direct impact on the value of our pensions, our private workplace pensions. So yeah, something to think about in terms of, we've looked at property in one of the last videos in terms of demand over the coming years, arguably being reduced and possibly then having a detrimental impact and effect on prices. But certainly in terms of industrial property, offices and retail, I mean, these things are all shut at the moment. Industrial, there's a high level of businesses being kind of dormant or closing at the moment, and unemployment high. And then offices, people are working from home, not using them in a lot of cases. Same with retail. So 15% of my pension portfolio is built into property, which is mainly comprised of these three different areas. That's not something that I want to be the case, and that's not something that I want to keep longer term. Now then what I noticed was, and my assumption with my workplace pension scheme was that this is going to be quite a safe portfolio, in the sense that there will be quite a lot in terms of cash, maybe government bonds and things like this, longer term, that are in theory more safe than these other assets anyway, and more maybe commodities, things like, I don't know, gold, silver, oil, just some sort of random balance of different assets, just to provide a bit more security there in terms of the portfolio spread. Now, what shocked me is that that wasn't the case at all. So shares 70%, property 15%, that's 85% in, frankly, straight risky assets, okay? Bonds 10%. So only 10% of my pension portfolio is in bonds. Now, if we take a deeper dive into the bonds, 50% of this 10%, so 5% of the overall pension portfolio, my one, is in high yield bonds, risky bonds, otherwise known as junk bonds. So they're bonds that are not regarded as investment grade bonds, effectively. So at least half of this 10% of bonds are high risk, in the sense that, I'm not saying like alarm bell high risk, but I'm saying that they're not safe. You're getting a return in theory that's a lot higher than the Bank of England base rate if you're looking at it in the UK, or basically the interest rate anywhere around the world. High yield bonds, junk bonds, risky bonds are going to provide you in theory with a higher coupon, a higher percentage return than you would get if you had the money sitting in the bank. But they are risky and they are exposed, they give you more exposure to risk, in the same sense that property trackers would, or stock shares or equities would. So yeah, that was concerning. And then I realized 25% of the bonds, so what, 2.5%, were corporate bonds, and then the remainder, the other 25% of the bonds, 10%, was in government bonds. So again, corporate bonds in theory are safer than shares, but there's still some risk there. And then government bonds, while there is risk, they're probably the lowest risk, the most risk-free assets of the lot. But it's a joke how these guys run. It's like the stocks and shares is split into loads and loads of different funds, which are split into like smaller funds again type thing. It's wacky how these guys actually make their money, when in all reality you would actually make more money just putting it on in an ETF or some sort of tracker over time, as has been proven the case time and time again. But effectively, these guys make money by making transactions, by making money on the transactions and the commissions, but it doesn't actually benefit you in any way, because every tiny little asset that you have comprised of the total composition of your workplace pension portfolio, it's such a small, like any gains or losses that you make are such a small, insignificant amount to your actual pension portfolio that it benefits them in the short term, but it doesn't benefit you. So anyway, lastly, commodities. It's only 5%, so we'll not talk about it for long, but I actually have it up here because it's a joke that 5% of, it's such a spread, but 5% of my overall workplace pension portfolio is spread over gold, copper, soybean, corn, wheat, Brent crude oil, silver. So look, that's probably safe to some or other extent, or it's certainly going to be less exposed to crazy market fluctuations than stocks and shares and property trackers and things like this. But yeah, so what I would have expected in terms of a safe pension portfolio would have been a lot more bonds, and a lot more government bonds specifically. And when I say government bonds, I mean longer term government bonds, so like 30-year government bonds. Now, the problem with, I was looking at this, and this is exactly what I'm going to speak this coming week with my pension provider about, is moving my pension portfolio to something which is really highly levered towards long-term government bonds. Now, the problem with long-term government bonds, and the one that I'm looking at specifically at the moment, is the UK 30-year government bond, is the coupon that it pays, the percentage of interest that you get on it, is only something like 0.5%. Nothing. You're basically like, it's effectively like sitting on cash. However, you don't have exposure in the same way that you would if you were, really heavily levered towards stock, shares, equities. And as we're now at what I regard to be a really inflated scenario in the stock market, what I'm going to try and do anyway is capitalize on that scenario right now by moving the current pension portfolio of mine to a highly safe, long-term government bond, 30-year type deal. Now, people would say, why would you do that? Inflation's going to get you, your inflation's going to be more than the 0.5% coupon that you're going to get returned in your bond. Well, effectively, if I reckon that at some stage soon enough, stock markets, housing markets and things like this are possibly going to take a bit of a hit, if not like a really, really big hit, then I'll absolutely want to be in the asset which guarantees me, well, not like this won't guarantee, there's still some sort of technical risk that governments could default on bonds, but what I would perceive to be the safest option in terms of the lowest risk asset available to me here, that's the one that I'm going to be going for. Plus, in a very similar way to the way in which shares work, you actually buy a bond at a certain price, and if the demand increases for those bonds, the price, it goes up just in the same way that shares does. So the way I'm looking at it is, I'm going to see if I can buy long-term government bonds. Then, if and when there is a bit of a crash, I'll then probably ask them to then move it back to what's more of a normal type portfolio. But yeah, so I understand this is all very confusing, and you're going to have to do, if you have any intention of doing anything with this kind of new knowledge or start thinking along these lines, you'll have to do your own kind of due diligence and work into it, and maybe discuss this with different people who are experts. And like, this is not my primary field or anything like that, but I'm certainly interested in it, and I have done a bit of a deep dive into it recently. So yeah, hopefully there's some good information that you've got from this, and basically it's certainly not advice, but the kind of strategy that I will adopt with my pension portfolio, certainly anyway, short to medium term, will be keep it safe. Keep it as safe as you can. There's a time to raise the mainsail and plow on, and there's also a time to kind of bunker down and just tie everything tight and close and hold on tight for dear life. So that's what we're going to be doing for the coming months. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I'm rambling. Subscribe to the channel if you've got value out of it, and any feedback, positive, negative, any just interaction, I'll always appreciate, because I love this stuff, as scary, crazy as it is. Yeah. God bless. Much love. Keep the faith.